you have to practice what you're going to do. And you can't just like turn it on and be like, oh, here I am, like the star player.
Yep.
And then the whole week just give lack of effort.
Yep. And you can beat 99% of the people by doing the 1% of things that they don't even want to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, welcome back to the Pure Playbook. I am Dr. Dustin Boston here with the athletic trainer herself, Erin Ruggieri. Super excited as we get started into this particular podcast. This is this will be number 34.
Yeah, 34.
So number 33 was Batty Bev, your mom. We had as an awesome guest. I just want to take a minute and say how awesome that was. Not many podcasts make it past like 3, 6. And we're at 33. This is our second podcast we've done within our practice, but 33 is a big number in our world. Well, at least in my world. You guys kind of have to adopt it.
Yeah.
You're guilty by association. But there's a lot of underlying meaning as far as the number 33 in this practice. So stay tuned. If you have questions on that, feel free. Fire away. Why 33? But it was super cool to have the 33rd podcast as somebody close to us.
Mm-hmm.
So as we get going here, this one is, as we're transitioning into warmer weather, okay, going into summer, we're getting a lot of questions about, okay, what can our athletes be doing preemptively as temperature starts rising? I remember back in the day, it's like, oh, you might have 2-3 games in a weekend. You play a tournament, do some round robin, and it's kind of spread out. Now it's like 2 or 3 games a day, whether it's soccer or baseball or whatever, swimming, lacrosse. It's like, holy cow. And so we've had a couple parents reach out. We've got probably across the nation, state cups, so to speak, in soccer starting to take off here in the next couple weeks, where they've got a lot of qualifiers, teams still trying to get in. And the first week of June here in our area, that first weekend is state cup soccer. And so we're getting a lot of reaching out like, hey, they've got like 7 games in the next 2 days, 4 days. What can we be doing? How can they recover? What should they be eating? What's the carb loading stuff about? And we have a lot of good podcasts that you can kind of pick through too, on the nutrition side, on the mental side, on the recovery, and how to care for a student athlete. We've got a couple different podcasts that we can sift through there, but let's see if we can't kind of summarize it in this one as we make a transition, and then we'll see if we can get into talking about a little what's going on in professional sports. But let's talk to the student athletes a little bit.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for when it comes to heat and preparation is just starting it early and not like thinking, oh, like on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I have games outside. Like on Thursday, I'm going to start drinking water and electrolytes and eating better. It has to start weeks, months. Like it has to be a lifestyle versus a fix-all Band-Aid because of what you're going to be facing against the weekend.
Yeah, so a couple key components as you head into weekends like that is we'll just start with fuel. Fuel is going to be one. Personal care is going to be one. Mental preparation can be one. Time management can be one. And so let's just kind of talk on those keys. But let's start with fuel. That's going to be the quick fix. It's like, well, if nothing else, let's just make sure they're fueled ready. And there's a lot that can go into this. Because everybody's body's a little different. The electrolyte conversation, and it's like, okay, if you drink too much, are you pulling water from areas you don't want to pull water for? And I can get all techie and nerdy on this. We can go the biochemistry route on this, but where there's more concentration, more water will flow to. So it's like, oh, let's just pack with electrolytes. So there's going to be points too where it's like, that sounds like a great idea on paper. Let's just overload.
Right.
So if you have all of these electrolytes, all of this concentrated solution, we'll say, in one area, and you've got water just across the bridge in other areas and tissues, if you have too much concentration in one area, that water will start to pull from other areas to dilute. It will try to pull as much as it can into the tissues in other areas, but you got to remember, anything that's in a solution, those are bigger molecules that have to cross all kinds of pathways and membranes, and so there can be a lot going on there. This is why, just like you said at the beginning, is doing this sooner, fueling and flooding the body sooner in all the right ways is very important, because you're not just going to wake up and body armor is a much better pick for me. There's organic Pedialyte kind of things, which is very heavy in electrolytes. But the standard is it's like, oh, Gatorade's better.
Yeah.
Let's drink 4 gallons of Gatorade before 10 a.m. and we'll pee a lot, and hopefully I'll just save everything I need for the weekend or for that day. And it really just doesn't work like that. It's kind of a misnomer. So definitely starting days ahead of time and having a plan of, I'm not even a big proponent of a gallon of water. We've said that on another podcast. But, the 100 ounce mark is a good idea. But some of these younger athletes, weigh anywhere from 80 to 135 pounds.
Yeah.
So, at least getting in, just say 70% of ounces per pound. So easy math. If you have a 100-pound student athlete, getting 70 ounces of water in a day and cutting it in that aspect. But then you can supplement with some good electrolytes. We use things like Noon and the
Element, yeah.
the LMNT, the Element packets. There is organic Pedialyte kind of drinks. Body Armor is one thing that I put in at the racetrack, and Pickles. Pickles is a great source for good sodium intake and easily to cross and digestible. But that has to happen days prior.
Yeah.
So I would say 3 days at least prior to a weekend like this of 5, 6, 7 games from a Friday through a Monday or Tuesday. Has to start there.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing too, you kind of touched on a little bit, but the time management piece, like it also comes with managing your time, what you're doing before. So like if you're going to have this huge weekend of being outside, maybe don't spend your whole week doing that same thing. Kind of conserve your, not energy, but kind of conserve like how much you are exposing yourself to the elements and the heat, especially in our area when we get in July, like it's 105, it feels like outside. And so making sure that if you are spending time outside, you're taking care of yourself after, so that in that weekend, you're not wasting time by sitting and having to get rags and all the things.
Yeah. Here's the last thing you want to do as well as far as the self-care and time management side. And we're going to kind of jump around here a little bit. We'll go back into the nutrition thing, but on the time management and self-care, we'll kind of put together here for a second, is do not rest that whole week prior to that big weekend.
No.
Because, it takes, 8, 10, 12 weeks to get into some sort of shape. And it takes about 2 weeks to get out and lose a very high percentage of the conditioning and preparation that you've done physically. Stay in your routine. Oh, we're going to practice less. It's like, the hell we are.
Yeah.
Like if your team is giving you off a practice, take the time and put in 80% effort, put 100% effort into 80% of a workout you would normally do. And stay consistent. Keep the endurance up. Keep the activity up. You don't want to take the week off, and that's not preparing. The rest is not the opposite of work, but rest can also kill the work that you have done in this case. So make sure that you're staying consistent in a routine, and if you have practice off, jog, do some intense, more intense thing, active rest, exactly. Run some sprints, do some drills, get out with some, and take your teammates along with you. If you want to be a leader, and we talk about this a lot, take the teams with you. Hey, I know we don't have practice. I'm going up to the field. I'd love to see everybody there. As a matter of fact, you all are going to be there. Here's when I'm going to be there. Let's just get after it. Keep the ball on the foot, throw some pitches, whatever sport it is you're playing, and stay consistent with that. But yes, the time management piece is the other thing with that too, especially as student athletes. Make sure you have all your stuff done. Right? Spend a little bit of time at night. You get home from practice, rail out that homework, get ahead on some things, and give yourself some, I hear a lot of times it's like, oh man, I had so many games this weekend. I've got a report due tomorrow. I haven't even started yet.
Yeah.
And that can kill the performance that you're trying to put out on the field on the weekend, because subconsciously you're thinking about, oh man, if I want to win this game, if I win this game, I got to push it. Like subconsciously you will start to think of those things. So student athletes and parents, make sure that we're ahead of the game. My kids, as they get older, if they start to do that, I'll be like, look, you got 2 options. You either get prepared and get ahead, or don't play.
Yeah.
Like there's life is bigger than just a scoreboard and the games you have to play over the weekend. I want to eliminate your stress, but you have to be responsible for what's really important get ahead, get the homework done. And a lot of times right now, I mean, we're looking at kids are out of school, but this is, let's just talk about things that happen in the fall, in the school year too. Like make sure anything that needs to be taken care of, jobs, some of the kids have summer jobs, make sure all that's handled way ahead of time.
Yeah, and going back to the nutrition part a little bit, like in those downtimes you do have in between games or like you're done for the day, making sure that you're refueling your body too. It's one thing to, like we've talked about already, be prepared for the game and drinking the water and all the things, but it's another for replenishing all of that after the day is done or the game is done. And I think a lot of the time, like it is very common for athletes not to be hungry in between games and after even, but like you have to be eating something. And we talked about that on our podcast with Caitlin McNally. She was like, that's whenever I usually suggest like the liquid carbohydrates and the ready to drink shakes, because it is easier to get down, but you have to be eating something in those moments.
Yeah. So for those of you athletes, like I get it, adrenaline's high, it'll suppress some of the appetite. But you know, you guys need to be fueling yourself. Take a little lunchbox, take a snackle box, if you will. That's what we call them, snackle boxes. You know, maybe you can talk your mom and dad into getting you that real cool Yeti lunchbox, and you know, you promise them you'll eat it if you get it.
Yeah.
But take care of yourself. You know, don't. No, I'm fine. You know, I'll eat afterward. No. Get the simple things, the snack sticks, the jerkies, high protein stuff, good complex carbs, good fats, avocados. You know, there's so many good things you can do, and be strategic where you go out to eat. If you have 4 or 5 hours between a game, you know, be strategic with what you're going to eat. And yeah, there's Chick-fil-A and there's all this stuff, and they do have better options if that's what your options are. You know, get the grilled stuff, not the fried stuff. That's not the good fats. You know, be very clean with what you can eat. Increase protein, increase good fats and the high omega fats, and then increase complex carbohydrates. All of the 256 carbs that are in a Starbucks shake or a Starbucks drink ain't it. That's not good carbohydrates. So if anybody needs more information on that, you can reach out to us. I do a lot of the sports nutrition consults here in the practice, and we can discuss more on that. But definitely, you're so right when it's eat during the game. Have a snackle box during the game. Pound down a beef stick. You know, those Archer beef sticks are great. We have a cheat sheet of what we would recommend right off the cuff that we can send to you guys. So if you want to reach out, feel free. But definitely eat during, after every game and refuel for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's something kind of going into our next thing about relationships that like you have to pass down as you're becoming a leader and an older person on the team or in the program or whatever. Like whatever you're doing in between the game, before the game, after the game, these new people are going to do.
Yeah.
And so it's, as a new person, I would be like, oh, what are they doing? And I would do it. That's just normal human nature.
You're leaving a legacy.
Yeah, it's just normal human nature to look up to those people that are ahead of you. And so that's why it's so important, especially if you're a leader, that you are leading by example and not just in the field, but off of it as well.
And then there is the relationships too, is sometimes you're out of town or maybe you're in town or whatever the case might be. And it's like, I remember on these trips, like we'd be in a hotel or something and, you know, after hours, it's like you're wound up and then all of a sudden you don't go to bed till 11 or you sleep over at somebody's house or, you know, parents are out of town, you have to stay with a friend and it's like all good things, you know, just have some, you know, as a parent, make sure, you know, some parents are very much more diligent in that. A lot of parents are more fun and free floating on like, oh, let them do what they're going to do. And that's fine too. But depending on what the goal is, just make sure as a coach and as a parent, but even as an athlete, take control of what you're responsible for. And if you have to stay somewhere or you want to get the team together, have a plan that evening of here's when we're going to eat, here's when we're going to do some team bonding, and then we're going to shut it down. You know, there's not going to be 12 hours of jokes going into 2:30 in the morning when we've got a game at 9, 10, 11, or the next day. I don't care.
Right.
You know, get some rest, but make sure you control that environment after that day is done when there's another day ahead, and have a plan with who relationally you're hanging out with and what that plan is, and managing time and setting yourself up for success going into that next day.
Yeah, and I think that's huge. I mean, the NFL draft just happened a few weeks ago, almost a month ago. And so these new rookies are graduating college and now they're going into the NFL. And they're entering this kind of like shiny, brand new place that they don't really know a lot about. And so that's why it's so important that like you're saying, like you are someone who gathers the team and introduces them to people and shows them around, because they're not going to be the ones who are like, hey, can you show me where the bathroom is?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
you have to do that for them just so that they feel comfortable as well.
Right. So, I mean, as summer unfolds here and you go into some of these environments that are new or on these bigger stages, absolutely make sure you know where you're at, what you're around, what your options are.
Find the good people.
And find the good people that can lead you in that right direction. But always keep in mind that, yes, there's people watching you. There's new people on the team. There's maybe siblings that'll be coming up into that program as well that you can set the standard for. And so, I mean, you watch a lot of these guys. I mean, we have hockey playoffs going on right now, and it's really no different at that. They have access to more easier, right? And that's what we're trying to bridge the gap for student athletes and their parents, giving them great resources that they can trust and excellent healthcare advice and
care like the pros.
Care like the pros, absolutely. And they have more access to this stuff very easily. The replenishing, the chefs, the food, they don't have to think about that. But they're going through, it's really no different. It's just on a different scale that, you look at Boston going 7 games, you look at Dallas going 7 games, and even some of these 6 games, it's like they jump right in, they have 2 days off, and then, they run right back into the next series where maybe a team had more days off, which we can get into the whole dynamics of the good and bad of all of that. But they are still replenishing, taking care of their body, doing the recovery things, getting checked. There's even on the chiropractic side, and they're doing a lot of the IVs and nutrition consults and cryo and game ready and Normatec, and they're making sure they're kind of dictated to do that.
Yeah.
But at that level, they don't need to be either. So pretend you're at that level. And if you don't have those resources, ask.
Yeah.
And if you're watching this and you're across the country and you're not in the St. Louis area, ask. I might have somebody in that area that you can have that provided for you, or at least get closer to care like the pros in a different area. But these guys are doing the same thing in these series where, it's 7 games, potentially 7 games in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Some student athletes are doing 7 games in a weekend, but just think about that for a second. And we want to make sure, because these kids are different nowadays, the demand, the training, their growth, it's different. But honestly, we're here to make sure that they have the same access and at least the same information. So you can't say, man, I wish I would have known.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, I noticed that, like you were talking about how they only have like a day off or 2 days off or whatever. I really never noticed that until it was the WNBA playoffs. And like Iowa won one day, and then they had like a day, and then they played for the national championship. And I don't think I ever realized that they didn't have like not weeks in between, but like they got to go home and like practice in their own gym and like feel comfy and then come back.
Exfoliate and take a bath.
No, like they just go, and that's the same way that hockey is too. Yeah. But even I think the big one that comes to mind with like the scheduling is baseball. Yeah. I feel like baseball, it's like doubleheader, 1 morning off, doubleheader, 1 morning off, and then there's traveling and all of the things. But I mean, we do it because we love it. Yeah. But you also have to keep yourself going with the nutrition and the relationships and the time management and all of the things because you do love it also. So you owe it to yourself to take care of your body, to take care of your fuel. Yeah. To be able to do all of those things that we all love doing as athletes.
Yeah. And it also gives you ability to, and everybody knows this and everybody hears it all the time, but controlling what you can control in these aspects, whether it be the schedule, like you can't control the schedule when these games are played, especially in the playoffs. In a lot of these professional sports, it's 2 games. Like if we're the home team, 2 games at home, 2 games away, 1-1-1. You go back and forth. They have flights involved. Yeah. The pressure changes has a big effect on the body. Like that's a whole different deal, so to speak. But, then these kids, these student athletes have a game Friday, doubleheader Saturday, potentially, depending on what happens there, they might have a 3rd game or they have a doubleheader the next game. And control what you can control, because you can't control the schedule, you can't control the weather, right? But you can control what you put in your mouth, you control how you speak to yourself, you can control when you go to bed, and having that planned out. And if you don't know what the heck to do, it's like, oh, are these drinks good? It's like, oh, let's just get the Gatorade. Gatorade's so high in sugar, and a lot of it still has dyes. Oh, what about the organic Gatorade? We can go through label reading and all that, but if you really really want to get down to it, you have to go through those things, because how the body processes it through a very intense time. Like, these kids are burning 6, 7, 8, 10,000 calories in a day.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy cow. And how much water are they losing? Weigh them before and after and really see. One of my last baseball games, the heat index was 112 degrees. We had a doubleheader that day.
No.
I was a catcher, and I literally came in I stood on the edge of the dugout. I put my hands out like Jesus, and everybody took my stuff off for me. They stuck it in a cooler. They handed me my drinks. I had it was Gatorade at the time. Body Armor wasn't out then, but I drank 1 little Gatorade to 3 bottles of water. Wouldn't like slam it down, and then inning would be up. We'd go back out on the field. I'd stand there like Jesus again, and I would thank everybody for helping me, and I would go back. But it's like knowing those things. But weigh me after that game.
Yeah.
I think I was 8.5 pounds lighter after a game.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy cow. But then ask the better questions and be like, okay, why does this happen? You want to get totally techie, nerdy? Great. It's like, I don't need all the nerdy stuff. Just what can I do? So important. But those are controllables.
Yeah.
What should we be eating? How should we meal plan for our team? Well, that's what the Pure Athlete is for. That's why we created the Pure Playbook, and we're talking about this. And we can really start to, my team's doing this. How can we be better? We've got a softball team that's on board now. We're talking with a hockey team. So we can talk about these things and help control, advise on the controllables. It's such a big deal. So there can be a lot there, but there's plenty of resources out there. We're just trying to make it easier for that too.
Yeah, and I think kind of last thing to like wrap up that at least is like you control what you control, and the one thing you also can control is your mental state going into these things. If you're going into a hard weekend or something like that thinking like, oh gosh, this is going to suck, like it's so hot, like I'm going to be so sweaty and all these things, then you're going to have a bad weekend.
Yeah.
But if you go into it like this is another opportunity for me to play the sport I love and do all these things, then you're going to have a better weekend. And just preparing yourself during practice, like you need to be practicing at the intensity you're going to be playing to be able to be successful. You can't just, I've talked about this all the time, but you have to practice what you're going to do. And you can't just like turn it on and be like, oh, here I am, like the star player.
Yep.
And then the whole week just give lack of effort.
Yep. And you know, you can beat 99% of the people by doing the 1% of things that they don't even want to do. And it's like, oh, I'll just eat this. This will be fine. You know, oh, I'll go to sleep when I want. It's like, you know, there's all of those things matter, and they're simple things you can do. But that mental state, you're so right, because yes, it's going to be hot. I don't care where you live. It's going to be dry hot in Southern California, Arizona. It's going to be wet hot in the Midwest and, you know, the South Central part of the States. It's going to be wet hot in the Southeast. Like
might be cicadas.
Yeah, it's like you can come up and all you're doing, I don't even want to go down this road, but all you're doing is you're creating excuses for why you might not win because you're afraid of who you're playing anyway.
Yeah.
So don't do that. It's like go in there with some confidence, control what you can control, and don't worry about the things. Don't worry about the heat. Don't worry about what the dirt's like. Don't worry about if it's turf. Like, it is what it is. You didn't sign up to bitch about what you're doing, where you're playing, and what the weather's going to be like. You signed up because you want to compete and you want to showcase your skills, and you might want to take this to the next level, and you want to have a team around you. Like, the mission is still the same no matter if it's 30 degrees outside or 130 degrees outside.
Yeah.
Control what you can control, but have a great mindset going into it for sure.
Yeah.
Next.
Let's see.
The other thing I guess we can talk about too is like how does the warm-ups different? That was one of the other questions the parent asked me. It's like, what about warm-ups? Should anything change there? Not really.
No.
Not really. I mean, even in the cold, it's like there might be a couple other things we'd add or take some more time doing, like if it was colder. In the heat, you know, really not. It's like, oh, let's cut the warm-ups 10 minutes short. No, absolutely not. This is where the fuel matters, not the lack of time. But the warm-ups really shouldn't change. Good dynamic warm-up. Do not start warm-ups with static stretching.
Yeah.
Do not.
Yeah.
That would be thing number one. You know, light jog, you know, do some crossover stuff, do some band work. And then, you know, slowly get into some static stretching. I don't even static stretch at all. I do a lot of static move. It's not even dynamic, but you know, some of the movement stretching. Like I'd go down in like my catcher squat and just move the joints of the body and flex one way and the other. But do not start with a static stretch.
Yeah.
Everybody says get the juices flowing. Yeah, like light jog, run a pole or two if you're on a baseball field, or you know, run midfield and back if you're on the soccer field. You know, get a good dynamic warm up in first. Work thryou some plyos, and then yes, you can get into a little bit of static stretching. You don't have to go max load and all kinds of range of motion. You don't want to oversend the anatomical limit, but the warm-ups are still important. Do not cut them short. And then be very careful about just like, oh, okay, now I'm going to go put a bunch of ice on my body because it's super hot. I'm going to put ice on my neck. It's like, hang on a second. That's a whole nother deal. But get a good warm-up in. You're going to sweat. You're going to enjoy it because by the time you hit the game and adrenaline goes up, you're not even going to notice it until after the game. And it's like, holy cow, it's so hot. But the warm-up side of things really shouldn't change.
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception with that, like whenever it is warmer, is that you don't have to actually warm up because the heat is doing it for you. But that's not true.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing whenever people like want to heat up their knee or their ankle before they go practice because they think that's going to warm it up. That's just superficially warming it up. And same thing with the heat outside. Like your skin might be hot, but your muscles are not warm.
Yeah.
There's no, unless you're going to put it at the sun, it's not going to go that deep. And so I think that's something I hear a lot is like, well, it's hot outside. So like, we don't have to stretch and we don't have to warm up and do all the things. I don't need to get on the bike before I come out to practice because it is warm outside. No, it's just superficial heating and you're actually not doing anything for your muscles and your performance in that aspect.
Yeah, well, I don't want to start sweating yet and lose all my, that's not how it works. It's like, honestly, sweat sooner.
Yeah.
Because if you do the things we're saying at the beginning of this and you concentrate on the fuel and the things you can control ahead of time, what's the recovery look like ahead of time? How are you fueling yourself ahead of time? You will be well prepared because you're also going to have those things on deck during the game.
Yeah.
So I would say sweat faster. Honestly, like you can you're going to get through the time frame of whatever game it is, and you have a halftime, you have between innings, you have things like that. It's not like you're going to be going 13 hours straight, right? So sweat faster, get that going, keep that going, fuel appropriately during that time and throughout the game, and continue on. Once that game ends, recovery, things like Normatec, getting those fluids back in. I like the 3-to-1 ratio, not the big, huge 32-ounce bottles, even just the 16-ounce bottles, 12 to 16 ounces, a couple bottles of 12, 16-ounce water on the back end of that, and continue with that. Get those snacks in, and then guess what? You get to do it all over again. But a lot of student athletes and parents, either they just don't know, and that's okay. This is not a judgment thing.
Yeah.
That's why we're giving this to you. But we do see a lot of that go to the wayside. And it's easy as a parent, too. It's like you got other parents there, you're talking, you're chumming up, and it's like, oh, man, great game. And then all of a sudden you're talking after the game, and 45 minutes goes by. And it's like, shoot, now we don't have time to go get anything. You want me to get you something from the snack bar? Here's some nachos.
Yeah.
And it's like, be very careful of that. It's okay to say, hey, why don't we take this conversation over here and get the kids something to eat? How about we go over to this restaurant and we can continue to talk about this. I don't want to miss this time. Having a team parent even to control that, because it's easy to do.
Yeah, it's really easy.
But we hear a lot of like, oh, I never thought about bringing a lunchbox into the locker room or into the dugout. It's like, heck yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think especially like you talked about post game a little bit, but the pregame meal too is so important. And like the team mom, it's so important to think about, what is it outside? What are they going to be doing? What should they be eating? They should be eating 3 hours at least before the event. And so I think a lot of the time we get so excited about like a pregame meal with our team and we get the pastas and we carb load, but you don't have to carb load all the time. Yeah. And especially whenever it's hot outside, like that's probably the worst thing that you can do before going outside and doing that, because you're just going to end up cramping. Your body's going to feel sluggish and run down, and it's just not always the case.
Yeah, and the carb loading too will hit, and like you said, the Caitlin McNally podcast conversation was just a couple back. You guys can go back and listen to that, because we talk a little bit about this. And but the carb loading, you have to take into account, what sport are you in? We just had one of our newcoming track stars. She takes up track this year, and she just goes and crushes it. That was super awesome. Wins like 2 or 3 events and finishes second in one of her relays. Just so awesome. But the sport you play depends on what you should be intaking and how you should be intaking. What's carb loading actually look like, and what are good carbs that you carb load with?
Carb loading.
But if you're a track star where you're running distances and things like that, that is more of a carb loading scenario, but it can't happen all in one day. It's not going to happen 12 hours before the event or 3 hours before the event.
Right.
But you look at your soccer, your aerobic sports, your
what does that mean, Dr. Dustin?
That's when the body is using so much oxygen. It's an oxygen deficit because you're demanding so much oxygen, and it depends on how your body uses fuel. So having a good carb load. Let me say it this way. If you are an oxygen dependent sport, you're running, you're nonstop things where it's just go, 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 go all the time. Baseball, not an aerobic sport. Football, even depending on the drive, not really, because there's time on the sideline.
Yeah.
Lacrosse, field hockey, hockey, not even so much. You have shifts. You're 30 to 90 seconds on the ice. That's not aerobic. Depending on like your distance swimmings, your triathlons, yes, aerobic. So what happens is when you're so air dependent and you're just nonstop, your body's metabolism will flip into, it'll use all the sugar it can and use all the carbs it can, and then it starts burning fat, and then it starts burning protein. Okay, so to burn fat, it takes an aerobic process. Okay. Now, you look at the other sports, that's anaerobic. So you're sit down, stand up, jog out, weight, your baseballs, your hockeys, football, again, is even one of those, dance, cheerleading, those kinds of sports are very much like, you definitely don't need to over carb load. And because then all of a sudden you have all this excess sugar in the body, because carbs just break down to sugar.
Yeah.
Complex carbs break down into better sugars, but it's like essentially it breaks down to sugar, but you don't use all of that because you're not go, go, go all the time. And now you have some of this free floating sugar, insulin spikes, and now you've got a cortisol effect, and there's so much, and you can see so if you have questions about that, I love talking about those things and making sense of that, because a lot of times it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
There's a lot to this.
Yeah.
Like, tell me more. Like, what should we be doing? And this is how, I've been able to help a lot of teams and individual athletes, because it really depends. Like, oh, let's carb load before a game. And then the next day it's like they don't want to get out of bed. They're super sluggish. It's like, yeah, you just fed them 96,000 calories of freaking pasta. Great on paper, but understanding some of that. So depending on what sport you play, be very aware of what you should be eating. But yes, 3 hours before a game, even 45 minutes before a game, get a little spike, get a good lower, smaller protein bar in there, get some of that sugar free and ready to go right away. But be very, very aware that depending on the sport you play or your student athlete plays, really should depends on how you fuel ahead of time and when.
Yeah, and I think especially like when you have fueled in, you're going to fuel after, making sure that you're fueling during too. And we've kind of talked about that's like the time for the quick drinks, and don't just say like, oh no, I'm good on water. Like, take the sip of water and actually do the things. You might not be like thirsty, because again, adrenaline's going to suppress so much, but like your body's going to thank you for those little sips of water here and there whenever you do come off, or in the run. People who run and just like drink while they run, that's a talent on its own, number one. But actually do those.
Stub a toe.
Yeah, I could never. But like actually do those things, because your body later is going to thank you for those things.
Yeah. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, so some of the electrolytes that you take in, your vitamin C's, your B vitamins, and things like that. A lot of people need to know too. Like, those are most soluble. Do you know where they're the most soluble? Where in the digestive tracts they're most soluble and most absorbed?
Small? No, I don't.
Don't read my face to try to get the answer.
I don't know.
I ain't gonna give it to you.
I don't know those things.
The mouth and tongue.
Oh.
The cheek mucosa and tongue will actually absorb a lot. So, I mean, if you do have, some of us, crunchy people have like super concentrated like B vitamins and things like that, which everybody can have access to. But knowing that it's like, don't just shoot it, like swish it around, let it stay in your mouth for 15 to 20 seconds and then take it down and then wash it down with water, because there's a lot of absorption that happens up here, not just down in here.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of things like that you put under your tongue too.
And that's why.
Yeah.
So now it just depends on how that's built, what's all in it, so be very careful.
Don't be putting like, I don't even know.
Label reading, unfortunately, is huge. If I can make a hack to really, and I think there's some probably apps and things out there to help read with labels. I've seen some of those, but on the sports side, like if I ever figure out how to have 64 hours in a day and be a tech guru, I'd make it super simple for you guys. But just that's another piece of information you guys should know. Yeah.
We love fun facts with Dr. Dustin. We can make that a new segment. Fun facts.
All right. Producer Sam, do you have anything else you'd like us to go on with what we're talking about?
Yeah, actually.
Anywhere we want to go from here?
I have a question about swimming, because I was a swimmer and I obviously did not have these resources growing up. So I swam a lot outside in the summer, and I was like, oh, I don't sweat. Like I'm a sweat. Like we don't sweat. We
Ooh,
don't do
I'm gonna
anything.
put this here because I got another thought. I don't know where you're going, but I've got one.
I just want to know, like, I know that swimming is so different, especially since it is in the water and we're not exactly feeling the effects of the heat or the exercise that we're doing as we're doing it. What are some ways, obviously, that like we can recover, we can fuel ourselves like during our meets, our sport?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm gonna keep this right here because I'm not gonna lose this one. This is important across all sports. But you say swimming, and there's one thing that everybody's gonna think of when they think about beach and water. But on the recovery side, the preparation side, honestly, it really doesn't change. One thing that comes into mind is like, okay, what's in the pool? What kind of chemicals are in the pool? What is this chlorinated? Is there a combination? Is this saltwater pool? Like, what's the environment you're literally swimming in?
Mm-hmm.
Because for those of you science gurus, take you back to 6th grade. You know, everybody remembers osmosis. They don't know how to define it probably, but it's like, yeah, it's something about water going this way and that way. Like, what's the largest organ of your body?
Your skin.
Bingo, you stuttered.
I was like, is he tricking me?
No, I don't. I told you I don't play tricks. Is the skin, and a lot of people don't think that, which is why this thing is here, and I'm gonna go here in a second. But your skin is your biggest organ, and there's still a lot of processes. Like, it'd be super cool, and I don't know if there's any way to do it. I'm not sure. But to watch what happens when somebody's underwater and how things transmit over boundaries and skin and membranes and things like that. Because, you know, a lot of people, it's like, oh man, I'm so dead. I swam so long, or I didn't even swim. I was just floating around in the pool. And it's like, do you think that could be some of the transition of what's in the pool into the body, that the body's now trying to get out, working hard to get out? Like, I think there's a whole different level of fatigue, tiring, recovery that has to happen with swimmers because of just that. Now, the other thing is, but as far as fueling and things like that, it's all the same. Their body's going to work the same way, but that environment is key to think about. The other thing, too, is sunscreen. Like, swimmers, like anybody who plays outside, it's like, oh, yeah, copper tone it up, like, let's go, or tanning oil.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen softball players. I used to coach a softball team with my uncle, and it's like, oh, I'm going to wear tanning oil so I can, I was like, oh my gosh, ladies, like, what are we doing here? But
slippery.
For you fans in the stands, for you parents parked in the seats,
lather.
Yeah, for the student athletes out there playing, knowing what you're putting on your body as far as skin protection is huge.
Yeah.
You have to look at the ingredients. Some of the best things we use, Badger is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But again, your skin is your biggest organ. I mean, you can go the makeup route with dance and like what you're putting on your skin and, you know, your costume makeup and things like that. But summertime, swim, outside sports, everybody's like, oh, spray it on. It's like, holy cow. We need to probably come out with something and release something. So if you guys want it, like, tell us below and we'll show you exactly what we use. But I'll just tell you right now, Badger is one of the best. I think there's one or two other ones that I can get the link to, but I have that in the race car trailer. I'd put that on in the summer, and you know they do have a spray form. And no, it's not going to rub in as easy. Oh, it leaves white streaks. Too bad.
Yeah.
Like, rub it in. Don't use as much so fast. No, it doesn't spray as well or doesn't rub in as well. But you know what? It's a much better option for your skin. There's things like raspberry seed oil. And it's like, ooh, man, like you got your tin hat on, doc. I'm like, no, I'm serious. Like there's UV properties in those things that are much better for the skin rather than, you know, glycerin on the skin and all of these preservatives and toxins that are literally on the skin. It's like we're hearing more and more about skin cancer these days and tags and all this. It's like, well, it just happens. It's genetic. Nah, maybe you're predisposed, but you're just accentuating the opportunity for you to truly express it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, my grandfather drinks a lot, my mom drank a lot, so it's genetic, I'm going to drink a lot. No, you're just predisposing yourself because you're in a similar environment and you have available the same things that they had, so you use what they use.
Right.
So, you know, but that's why making sure what you're putting on your skin as an athlete, and that's why when you said swimming, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a good one to bring up. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So Badger is one of the ones we use.
Yeah, I think the other thing for swimming is just regulating your body temperature because I could be so wrong. You know, a girl really can't swim over here. But I would imagine that sometimes the pool can be colder than the environment that you're in. So then whenever you're getting out, it probably feels really nice that you're like either really chilly or really hot, depending on the humidity outside. But you need to cover up. Like, you need to get out of the pool and put on like a jacket or a shirt or something so that your core body temperature doesn't drastically go either way.
Yes.
And so that in between heats, right? Look at me go. In between heats, you're keeping your body temperature at an optimal state so that you can get back into the pool and not have that culture shock, basically, of your body system.
That's also a racing term. I like that. Heats.
Heat?
I won
You
the
won
heat.
your heat.
I did. Oops.
Oopsies.
Appreciate that.
Well, and that's good to know because I have experienced that phenomenon of being like, oh, the pool is cold because it's summer.
Yeah.
They want, obviously, they want you to be comfortable.
Yeah.
But then you get out and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so nice out here. And then you just stay without your shirt or you stay without your parka or obviously not a parka because it's not winter,
Right.
but
Yeah,
like
I'm
your
thinking
swim
about
shirt or
what's it like whenever after a marathon, like the heat jackets, you know what I'm talking about?
that
Yep,
they like
yep,
keep
yep.
you warm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those.
Well, also too, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you see it at the Olympics too. It's like you'll see these divers, swimmers, and then all of a sudden they're sitting in the jacuzzi afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, stay in a similar environment. Maybe they've got another heat, as you say. Maybe they've got another, competition that they have to swim or another event they have to swim in. And you see these guys circulating, and maybe it's not like a jacuzzi, but it's like a
whirlpool.
a whirlpool
Yeah.
tub where they're in the same environment, out of the sun if they're outside, and slowly letting themselves regulate. Where I can almost guarantee you that temperature that's in the competition pool and that's in the whirlpool is
Yeah.
probably too different to regulate and bring back.
Right.
We are not the first ones to come up with this, but I've never been in that environment, but I can almost guarantee you that's what that looks like. So take advantage of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about heat stroke. Let me just throw the disclaimer out there. If it's super hot, yes, get in the shade. Yes,
Yes.
drink water. Cold towel. Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
all the things.
Like when I had my catcher's gear on, like in that scenario I was talking about earlier, it's like, yes, I would put a cold rag over top of my head. It's 112, 113 degrees
Yeah,
outside.
yeah.
Like, yes, time and place for that. But you're talking 89, 90, 95. It's warm. So, yes, do those things and take precaution accordingly. But stock standard, just regulate very carefully.
Yeah, and what I'm going to kind of leave us on is a challenge for our listeners of the Olympics are coming up,
You
which
cocked
is
your head towards me. I was like,
a challenge.
don't challenge me. I'll challenge you to riding a bike in a pool and see how you come out of that.
I won't. If anyone would like to teach me how to
You
ride a
wouldn't
bike.
make it to the pool.
No, I wouldn't. I would need training wheels on my bike. But for the Olympics coming up, what I challenge all of our athletes and parents to do is just watch these athletes. Watch how they interact with each other, with their coaches, how they're taking care of their bodies. Because I think one of the cool things about the Olympics, especially with the development of social media, is that we get to see the behind the scenes. We get to see the not so shiny moments maybe. And I think those moments are the most important. I mean, the one that comes to mind is obviously Simone Biles because it was the newest one and just how open she was about like struggling with the Olympics last time. But watch those things. How are they walking off the floor or the pool? What else is there? The track, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But just pay attention this time.
Yeah. In Paris.
Yeah, Paris.
Paris. Je comprends français?
No,
Comprends. On comprend le
I'm
français.
Italian.
Well, with that being said, merci beaucoup. Au revoir.